how we respond to threat. We have evolved to respond to threat, which is of course crucial to our survival. Our autonomic, hardwired threat response system causes us to fight, flight, or freeze. Find out more in this short video. And when we come to responding to a threat, we have the mammal, reptile, and human response. So can you talk a bit more about the difference between those?
Yeah, I think, first of all, slight disclaimer, everything's kind of an approximate model. So if you really want to get deep into neurobiology and anatomy, you might find some areas of disagreement here, or things that are not as simple as we put them. But if you want to make it reasonably simple and accurate enough, I think it's okay to think of the reptile as the kind of freeze system in the body. So we have all heard of fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze is when you're really kind of, the deer in the headlights or playing possum, which already you notice are two slightly different modes of freeze. One's like a rigid freeze, the other one's like a kind of supine freeze. These things we think of as being regulated kind of by the reptile brain, which is the original response to threat. There's this tiny little brain at the bottom of our skull. It's also mediated by a part of the nervous system network called the dorsal vagus nerve. So these are really, you can see that they're physically separate parts of our body to other parts of our body. And then the fight-flight response you can think of as being run by the mammal brain. It's kind of in the middle of the brain. It's a bit bigger and obviously newer than the reptile, but older than the human. And we have a thing called a sympathetic nervous system, which is another strand of wiring, which really fires up our fight and flight response. And then we've got this enormous human brain, this cognitive machine, which regulates things like our social interactions, our social engagement. And that'll keep us out of fight and flight when maybe a baboon or a rabbit might be in fight or flight, because we're just more sophisticated and we have other strategies for solving problems. And that's mediated by a thing called the ventral vagus nerve, which is at the front of the body. And so you can see how the body and the brain is actually physically built layer upon layer, piece by piece, as evolution happens. We're in this incredibly sophisticated version of what used to be probably like a worm or a lizard.
So if you take me, for example, I'm someone who either freezes or I go somewhere else in my head, I go off into my imagination, I think, for escapism. What does that mean for me?
Well, humans are really sophisticated. So if you're a possum and you froze, you probably just lie down inert on the ground. Humans, when we get to a point where threat's overwhelming and we're kind of moving on from fight and flight and going towards freeze, there are different ways to do it. You could lie supine on the floor, but I think one of the things we've become adept at is kind of leaving the situation while staying kind of motorized. So it's almost like in our heads we just go, even though the body's still moving. It's like your sense of being present is no longer there. Or we can become very kind of vacant, very shut down, very low energy without being completely absent.
And then you have these great diagrams, which hopefully we will show, of the gazelle. Can you explain a bit more about that gazelle?
I think one of the things we try to do when introducing people to these ideas is tell a simple story. So to understand the way that your body responds to threat, we can just start thinking about like a lion and a gazelle. So you have a gazelle at the watering hole and it's minding its own business. Then a lion comes over the crest of the hill and all the gazelles are their ears prick up and they realize there's a lion around. So they start running. And one or two of the gazelles get very actively chased, they get caught. And what you see is that a gazelle will go from running full speed, and when it's about to be caught by the lion, it'll actually completely turn everything off and go into a dead freeze. Then the lion will catch it. So this is the transaction from fight, flight to freeze. And there are examples when having frozen and having been caught by the lion, and before the lion's killed the gazelle, for whatever reason, the lion is disturbed, maybe by another predator or there's something else going on. And so the gazelle is left looking like it's dead, but not dead. And after a few moments, the gazelle kind of comes back to life and almost like wakes up. And what's really interesting is it wakes up with the same amount of a kind of violence and energy that it had when it was running for its life or fighting for its life and froze. And so it emerges from its place of freeze back into fight and flight and runs and kicks and runs and kicks and discharges all of this energy and then ends up back at the watering hole, completely fine. And this is a really important beginning to understand what's happening for the human nervous system, because we come from that gazelle. Where our nervous system architecture is still the same as all mammals. It's just we've added to it with our human development, our human brain.